Okay, welcome everybody to St. Paul's Church in Nantucket. We have our Thursday Bible study where we look at the readings coming up for this next Sunday. The Sunday coming up is already the third Sunday of Lent. And Connie and I over here in the church, nice and warm, isn't it, Connie?
Yeah, I'm always cold.
I know. If you need a shawl, let me know. I've got the prayer shawl over here too for you.
Yeah.
Hi, Connie.
Hi,
Steve's joining us. We're hoping Marshall will join us. We'll see what happens. Good, everyone. So today, our readings that we're going to study are from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, 1 through 17, about the Ten Commandments. And then our psalm is Psalm 19, and that's found in the Book of Common Prayer, our version, on page 606. It's the Psalm 19. It's kind of a long psalm, but we'll kind of pace ourselves and we'll get through it. And then the gospel is John 2, 13 through 22. Jesus coming into the temple and overturning the changing tables. There's a lot of action. A lot of action in that one, that's for sure. So
this psalm is particularly beautiful.
Yes, it is a beautiful psalm. I'm glad they used the whole thing. They didn't chop it all up like they like to do. And so
this is one we memorized in Quaker school also.
Quaker school, Psalm 19?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we start with the collect of the day for Sunday. The collect is a prayer that collects our theme and our thoughts. So we often, on morning prayer, we have it later in the service, and when we have Holy Communion, which will be coming up in another couple of months, then we have it at the beginning of the service, just kind of set the tone. And this is this week we're using Rite One morning prayer on Sunday, which is a traditional language. And, where it's a language my dad spoke. My dad grew up in Boston. It was we shall go to the beach. It's thy and thou and shall, and so we're using that. And so we have different response, which our crew usually says anyways. When I say, "The Lord be with you,"
and with thy spirit.
Thy spirit.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who seest that we have no power of ourselves to help ourselves, keep us both outwardly in our bodies and inwardly in our souls, that we may be defended from all adversities which may happen to the body, and from all evil thoughts which may assault and hurt the soul. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I love that one.
That's a nice one, isn't it?
I have that on my breakfast tray. That's one of my
on your breakfast tray, really? Wow.
My favorite guy. Yeah.
You are very religious. Between the Quaker school memorizations and the icons in your house and the breakfast tray with quotes.
That's okay. Father Max, did your father use thee and thou in his speech?
He did. He used thee.
I love that. Yeah, because
thy.
The Quakers spoke like that. So in my youth, the 28 prayer book never sounded old-fashioned to me. That's the way all of my friends' parents spoke.
Yeah, me too. I know there was a priest that came to a big church in Delaware. I won't name it, but a very big church. Mm-hmm. And she said, "I'm not doing Rite One," which is, again, for those that don't know our prayer book, it's a more traditional language that goes back centuries. Mm-hmm. Now, we only change our prayer book every 75 years or so. And so what we still call the new Book of Common Prayer is 1979. And so we're traditionalists, but we're pretty hip traditionalists, I think, in the Episcopal Church. And I know a lot of people who just cried when they changed the prayer book at all, but they did include the old prayer book in this new prayer book. Mm-hmm. The previous prayer book was 1928, but it's so similar to the 1662 prayer book from the Church of England, because our offshoot is from the Church of England, and in the colonies they would use the 1662 liturgy, which is so similar to this Rite One traditional language, and not that different from what we call modern version is still timeless language. So anyways, so I like this about that we have no power of ourselves to help ourselves. which sounds like we're weaklings or whatever, but it reminds me of the 12-step programs, because I have so many loved ones that in 12 steps, that we realized that we were powerless, that we had to turn to a higher power, whatever our understanding of that is.
Max, what page is that on in the prayer book?
The college is on page 167. 167, the third Sunday in Lent college, traditional wording. And of course the word soul and body, as it talks about, I grew up in a different Christian tradition, different denomination, and so it was all about the soul, which seemed different. It seemed like it was separate from us, almost as people. But in our tradition, we use soul. It's really the essence of us. The essence of us lives on forever when we pass away, not just a little bit of us. The essence, everything but the physical body. So for God to keep the essence of us protected. And it's very Lenten,
One thing that's very beautiful in this, there's an awful lot to like in this little passage, that we may be defended from all adversities which may happen to the body, and as one gets older, you're aware of that sort of thing, and from all evil thoughts which may assault and hurt the soul. And if you read it casually, you might think like hateful thoughts against others, and sure, that we would like to be defended against that too, but also just the kind of despair that has overcome a lot of people in this last very tough year. And I'd like to be defended from that too. Those thoughts can hurt the soul, and that's just a beautiful, beautiful prayer, isn't it?
Yes, I'm into that, Steve, exactly. Now's a time for us, as we say, to come together. We said in the beginning of the pandemic, we're all in this together, but that hasn't been played out quite that way. and so,
hello, Loretta.
Yes, this is our dear friend Loretta, who's she's from our family down in Delaware, our parish family. And
all right,
so,
good.
Hi, Steve.
Yeah, Steve's a summer parishioner, Loretta, and he lives in New York City. This is Connie with us. She's a neighbor.
She lives about a block from the church.
Yes, yeah. In the shadow of the church. And Loretta lives very close, out in the country near my old 300-year-old chapel, not mine, God's, that I was the rector of. I was the rector of 2 churches for 17 years. So, welcome, Loretta. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Loretta, and so maybe you start. I posted the readings, and we're going to have Steve, if he's up for it, read the first one, which is Exodus 20, 1 through 17, and then we'll have the Psalm 19, and then we'll have the Gospel of John, chapter 2, 13 through 22. So, Steve, if you're up for it, I need to get speakers, but I think people can hear us.
Yeah.
Good.
A reading from the book of Exodus. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that it is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents, to the 3rd and the 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Well, that about says it all, doesn't it?
It says a lot.
To me, the most helpful thing in the little cheat sheet commentary that I always use, Dumelo's 1-volume Bible commentary.
Love that.
Fresh from Edwardian England, but it has a lot of good stuff in it. And in his commentary, I mean, the most troubling part is the business about punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and fourth generation, blah, blah, blah. He says, it's not the guilt that passes on to the children. He's saying it's the consequences of the sin.
Yes.
Can pass on. And that, bingo, that made a lot of sense to me.
That's right. It's not God punishing from generation to after generation. We're not punished for our great-grandparents.
Right. But if we sin, if we do awful things, it can affect our children or our nephews and nieces, the people we come in contact with, and that bad influence can continue on. And the flip side of that coin is, and the good stuff too, the 1000th generation, he says.
Yes.
The good effect can continue on too. So that commentary was very helpful to me.
Yes.
I like that one.
I just read a book recently by a woman who was raised in an ultra orthodox cult. I forget which one. It's one of those really, really
Like waiting for the end of the world kind of cults?
No, it was a Jewish cult. I'm sorry, And their leader felt that the Holocaust had been retribution for the Jews for everything that they've done,
that God had caused it.
Isn't that unbelievable?
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's like the Jerry Falwell's, not to pick on him, that said, 9/11, God made 9/11 happen. Baloney. Baloney. God was crying that day also, obviously. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like that. The book, Loretta, that Steve was talking about, he gave me a copy of that too. It's from 1903, I think, but it's timeless. It has wonderful insights, and it's very balanced too, Steve. Don't you think? A lot of things written at that time were so one-sided, kind of almost superstitious in some of the teachings. But this one's very learned. It's all Episcopal and Anglican priests and theologians that contributed to the Bible.
It's good sort of meat and potatoes interpretation, and it's only from 1908. It was practically the other day.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
I should have a copy of it.
It was in King Edward VII. It was in Edwardian.
Try to get your copy.
Also, one of the other really cool things that he says in here is about verse 9, where he's talking about the Sabbath day, and he says, it's sort of, I think there's a little humor here. It is sometimes forgotten that the fourth commandment enforces the 6 days work as well as the seventh day rest.
And remember how nice it was when all stores were closed all day, Sunday, the liquor stores.
I know. I remember when liquor stores opened up in Delaware on Sundays. Ollie said, "We're not going there on Sundays. You need something. Get the wine on Saturday. We're not going there."
Exactly.
That changed in about 10 minutes, though. But no, not all kinds of stores weren't open on Sundays.
Yeah, just recently in Nantucket, I remember when they finally started to open. I think it was in the late 90s at noon.
Yes, and here in Delaware too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, yeah, what they call the blue laws, right? The blue laws.
Yeah, noon to 5.
They're in Germany, they're really strict. And a number of years ago, I had a German friend staying for a while here in New York with me. And he used to love to go to like a bookstore or a record store on Sunday. He said, just for the sheer joy of being able to shop on Sunday.
The freedom, yeah.
So we're all sinning if we're working on Sunday?
Yeah, well, I know, like me. I have to work every Sunday. I try to take Monday as my Sabbath.
Right. But that's good.
And what you said too, Steve, there's a great book that I like to quote, and it's one that they recommended in seminary, and it's by Rabbi Edwin Friedman. It's called Generation to Generation, and he talks about, just as you said, it's some things are passed on, good and bad, that we should hold on to and emphasize in our lives the good things from our heritage, our families, and then some things we need to address and change it so it doesn't get passed on into the community, even if we don't have children like Ollie and me, that we don't want to pass on with our bad attitudes from my family or whatever, going forward to people around us, that we can look at those things and change the things we need to so it doesn't continue. Yeah, generation to generation it's called.
That's so interesting because one of my relatives received a letter from her father saying, just all these horrible things, but she said, I'm not going to tell anyone what was in the letter. I wanted to end.
Yeah, she doesn't want those words to be brought forward.
Yeah, which I thought was so interesting. It was such a good thing.
I know, just the other day I sat in the bishop's chair, safely distanced. One of our parishioners sat on the other side where Curtis, our verger, usually sits, and our seminarian Jonathan, and we had a conversation, and he's such a wonderful dad, but then he talked the heartache of having such a strict father himself, that he could never, there was never enough, He said, the mother said, oh, you got an A+ in math, and the father's like, why don't you do that all the time? Where's the other A+? It's like, and all of us have been there sometimes in our lives. My dad wasn't like that, luckily. I know my sister would say, Dad's always talking about our cousins. Talk about us. My sisters, right? Forget the cousins. Talk about us. So I guess that's a good reminder to sing the praises of the people right around you.
I also think it's interesting that obviously we all have mom and a dad, and you think about them when you're young, you think about them when you're older. And the interesting thing is when you do get older and you think back about your parents, you realize that some of your reaction to them was the reaction of a kid or a teenager, and that you mustn't perpetuate those attitudes. That was a big insight for me.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I had some resentments against my stepfather, and they persisted for a long time. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is, he was a man like me. He was as perfect or imperfect at different times as I am. And I came to see that a lot of the stuff he was after me about when I was a teenager was just because I was a typical lazy teenager, and he was trying to instill some thought for other people in me. And also it made me realize I wasn't the worst person in the world. I was just a typical lazy 15-year-old. And he was just a typical adult trying to help a 15-year-old. Yeah. And it's given me great peace. Even though he died long ago, I feel reconciled that I understand what he was about. And he wasn't a bad guy. He was a good guy.
Steve,
it's very, very helpful.
Yes, that's great. Obviously it worked because you didn't get lazy after that. You went to college, you went to...
Steve, how old were you when your parents died?
My father died when I was 6.
Oh.
And then my mother remarried 5 years later. She died when I was 27. And then my stepfather lived on for a while.
Yeah, too young.
My parents.
Yeah, I know. I miss them very much. And I look forward to seeing them again.
Yes, exactly.
I never knew my parents as adults, and it's always been a great sadness to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. When your mom dies when you're 27, I mean, you're not quite a full human being then.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just still a crazy person in their 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, it's this business here of in the Ten Commandments made me think about it, about how the consequences of things pass on through generations.
Yes, consequences, not punishment from God. Yes. Yeah, Ollie's dad was. Ollie was 21 when her dad died. I just met her, and I met the rest of the family at his wake. But so yeah, and I was blessed to know Loretta's mother, who was still dancing it well into her 90s, right, Loretta?
I love it.
Yeah, that's for sure. It should make you want to dance just being in the room with her. What a great character, Loretta. That's for sure.
She's a Roman Catholic, but she loved to go to the Episcopal Church. She said it was like a Chinese menu.
It was
like a Chinese menu, the Episcopal Church. Yeah, that's right. She risked condemnation by coming to the Episcopal Church too, which was I was so honored. And again, because this is not the normal Lent, I just realized after looking at this lesson from Exodus that when we had the normal Lents, I would start the service. Remember, with what they call the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. Yeah. And we would kneel. At St. George's Chapel, we couldn't kneel because the pews would be over our heads. They had really tall front of the pews. So we all stood around mostly. But I remember on my first Sunday there, everyone was sitting down during the communion part. I said, "No, we don't sit during communion. Get up. But you can't kneel." And then my other
actually standing is the more ancient.
Yes, standing is
practice, isn't it?
That's right. You see tiles down in the catacombs of Christians standing. I think with their hands facing out like this, in a circle around the altar, things like that. So they would stand is another respectful way. And then I would kneel at the altar, kind of representing everyone else, and I would say this. We have very traditional language on page 317. The Long Exhortation, and this goes back to the 1662 Church of England prayer book, which we had a copy of down in Delaware. It was printed in 1716. The church was built in 1719 originally, and it said it's even more old-fashioned than my dad would say. It said, "God spake these words." I don't know if my dad used the word "spake." God spake these words and said, "I'm the Lord thy God, who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have none other gods but me." And we would say, "Lord, have mercy upon us, and incline our hearts to keep this law." And it says, "Thou shalt not make to thyself any graven image, nor the likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water beneath the earth, under the earth rather. Thou shalt not bow down to them, nor worship them." And you say, "Lord, have mercy upon us, and incline our hearts to keep this law. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. Honor thy father and thy mother." And very simple. It says, "Thou shalt do no murder." Just simple. "Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet." And we say, "Lord, have mercy upon us, and write all these laws in our hearts, we beseech thee." Write the laws in our hearts.
Was that in the front of your church in Delaware?
We used to say this at the beginning of the service, but
some older churches have the Decalogue.
Yes, we had that in Wickford, Rhode Island. Beautiful little village, Wickford. When you're traveling, Steve, that's one that you and Joey should stop by and see. It has more colonial houses than Williamsburg, and people actually live in them. It's not museums. You go to someone's home and everything leans. You're in the dining room and your glasses it's like this. You're at the table.
My house is
everything's
like
settling. Connie's house is like that. And so, anyways, there they had, as you face the front of the church, they had the reading desk, which I love. Your reading desk. You're enclosed in this box. You have all your books, your tissue, your water there. And then above the reading desk was the pulpit. You had to climb up the stairs to the pulpit. And then on the side of the church, on the east, the eastern part of the church, was the table, very simple altar, and behind that was the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, and it was chiseled into slate tablets, like Moses received, very dramatic. And because often those were posted in our colonial churches to remind people of.
This is going to sound really reactionary, but we could do a lot worse than posting them in a lot of public places. I mean,
that is reactionary. A church is one thing, but not courthouses.
But in the school.
In parochial schools.
What I'm saying is, I know it's not fashionable to say so, but if people paid more attention to things like this, there'd be a lot less trouble in this world.
Yeah, just simple rules. But again, there's plenty of trouble before when we had prayer in schools and everything else that we had. People, they think the good old days were good for some people, but not everyone. But we have plenty of racism, plenty of sexism and homophobia, and even people being beat up.
Still, I'm saying these are good things.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
To bring them to people's attention is a good thing. I mean, I went to public schools when I grew up in Virginia, and we started the day with the Lord's Prayer and then the Pledge of the Flag.
Yeah.
I mean,
but the culture's different now. Culture's different. Yeah. But again, in those days were good for some of us, not as good for others.
I get that.
Yeah. Okay, good. So anyways, that's interesting. So I won't bother with the Decalogue this week because we're going to focus on it. But then I think next week, before we end Lent, I should begin the services with this. Maybe the Sundays going forward. Even though we're just having morning prayer, I think that's the Decalogue is a good way to go, just as a reminder. And of course, we down in Delaware, our parish administrator, Melissa, took a lot of days to transcribe our 1662 prayer book, the 1716 copy of it. She carefully put the service in the computer, and we used it for several years. Then we realized that we only had 9 commandments. It's like, wait a minute. And of course,
what did they leave out?
We left out "Thou shalt not steal" because it was like, give us your money. Come on. Yeah. But it took us no one noticed, there are only 9. We must have used those for 5 years to use that bulletin.
That's hysterical.
Anyways.
If you read articles about when they first started publishing the Bible in England, when it was still very controversial that lay people should have access to scriptures, there was a whole lot of printers were putting out Bibles because it was really the thing. And there was one called the Wicked Bible because it omitted one little word. It said, "Thou shalt commit adultery." You can look it up in Wikipedia.
But Father, it's right there in the book. I gotta do it. Really, that's funny. The Wicked Bible. Okay, so that's a good amount of material with that one. Yeah, and of course, Jesus makes it easy for us. The great commandment: love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah.
If you have a poor memory like me, you're really grateful. You boiled it down. Just 2 things you have to remember.
Yeah, when I have my confirmation classes, for confirmation and reception in the Episcopal Church, I ask them coldly, without any book, write down the 10 Commandments, and often people can do like 7 of them. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could get them all right.
Just to think about it. People won't remember steal now after I broke that one. Okay, so our psalm kind of usually leads us in our psalm, and she prays up to the asterisk, and then we pray the second half of the psalm. I pause a little bit for people to catch up to us on Zoom. And Facebook, it's on page 606 of the prayer book. 606 is the rendition that we use, the translation. And if you're using your Bible, it'll just be slightly different. Okay, Connie.
Okay.
Psalm 19.
Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God.
And
the firmament shows his handiwork.
One day tells its tale to another.
and one night imparts knowledge to another.
Although they have no words or language,
and their voices are not heard,
their sound has gone out into all lands,
and their message to the ends of the world.
In the deep has he set a pavilion for the sun.
It comes forth like a bridegroom out of his chamber. It rejoices like a champion to run its course.
It goes forth from the uttermost edge of the heavens and runs about to the end of it again.
Nothing is hidden from its burning heat.
The law of the Lord is perfect and revives the soul.
The testimony of the Lord is sure and gives wisdom to the innocent.
The statutes of the Lord are just and rejoice the heart.
The commandment of the Lord is clear and gives light to the eyes.
The fear of the Lord is clean and endures forever.
The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether.
More to be desired are they than gold, more than much fine gold.
Sweeter far than honey in a comb.
By them also is your servant enlightened.
And in keeping them there is great reward.
Who can I tell how often he offends?
Cleanse me from my secret faults.
Above all, keep your servant from presumptuous sins.
Keep going, Connie.
And let them not get dominion over me.
Then shall I be whole and sound, and innocent of a great offense.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight.
O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
I love that they make a big thing of making sure that the servant. That's really funny.
I mean, this is such beautiful poetry.
Oh, it is.
And the commentary points out that the first half is about the glory of the Lord, and the second half is about the commandments. So that's the relationship to the first reading. Yeah.
Yeah, and how the commandments aren't a burden, but are like honey, right? That God's law is sweet and not. Again, my experience of religion when I was young, not to criticize any other Christian denomination, was more about unworthiness. You know, we're unworthy to gather the company to the table, and the rules seem like, we're going to get boxed in by all these rules. But to see them as honey and something that's, that's freeing. The truth will set us free, not box us in, and that God's law is delicious.
Actually, some of the language in the King James Version is nicer.
As usual, Connie. Connie said the King James Version.
Well, I just remember it because...
That's what we have.
Yeah.
Over here, Connie.
Oh, goody.
We'll see. Those are the ones, can you remember? This is the one that that Steve and Jerry gave us. It's they were staying at their house out here in the rental, and there was no Bible, so they had to go down. And then down at the bookstore, they had there's no paperback Bibles. They had to buy like a real big, beautiful Bible. Look at gorgeous, really nice illustrations.
Yeah, they're the same one that did the ones for.
Who's the artist? Do you remember?
Was it Doré?
Doré.
Doré.
Yes. Yeah. He did the ones for lots of things.
For Dante.
Dante, yeah. And what else? I'm thinking of something else. Anyway, yeah.
So it says, in the King James Version, it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge." Yeah. There's no speech nor language, where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. And them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, his circuit unto the ends of it. There is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Remember that part?
Yeah, I remember it.
The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart, be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. When I was, Ollie, on our second date, I met Ollie when she was in college, and she was 21. I was old already, 30. So I took her to one of my, I was a high-end wine importer and merchant. I took her to one of my restaurants that loved me. They used to dress me, these Italian-American guys from the north end of Boston. And they thought I was too preppy. And so they gave me, they didn't like my wingtips. They gave me these, they look like Capezio dancing shoes, these nice Italian shoes. And they gave me a gold bracelet, like a gold, like a chain bracelet. Ollie still wears it. And so they like to dress me anyways. And so I brought Ollie there, because these guys love me. And it was an open kitchen in Brookline, Mass. The flames were coming off the stove, So, and then those guys, they said, Max, when you come, there'll be no money exchange. It's like going to a country club or something. We'll bill you once a month. And so, the check came, I just signed for it, like Mr. Rockefeller. Oh, yeah. And so then I said, Ollie, will you join me next Sunday? I just started going to this Episcopal church. And Ollie grew up Roman Catholic like I did. Not as strictly so, because I went to parochial school, went to Mass every morning with our classmates at 8, things like that. And her dad was Presbyterian, so she was from a mixed marriage, her parents, mixed marriage, Catholic and Presbyterian.
What a combination.
I know. And so, but anyways, we went to Trinity Church, and the rector said this every Sunday when he was going to preach. And he said the King James Version, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. And often our seminarian Jonathan Hughes quotes that too, the end of the 19th Psalm. Right? Let the things that we think about, the things we say be acceptable to God is worth praying probably every time before we open our mouths. I know my brain scientist friend would say, Father Max, you probably do this already, but when you're in a tough situation, stop and pray for a few seconds. God, what is the best thing I could say right now? I wish I had done this more often in my life. I wish I would think to do it even now. What is the most helpful thing right now? Not additional heaping on coals under the fire of a crisis, but what would be the healing thing to say? What would be the thing that would remind people of God's love in their lives and God's mercy? Those kind of things. I know especially when I was first ordained, a deacon first and then a priest. If you're on the path to priesthood, they were ordained a deacon first to remind us of our servanthood. And I used to be way out in the desert in Tucson in my first position, and going into some convalescent home, just praying that God would give you something to say that would be a comfort for the person dying or facing in crisis. Just praying that I knew I needed help beyond me. Right, as our colleague said, that left to my own devices, I'd be useless, but But with God's help, all things are possible. So, the Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Beautiful psalm. Again,
It's really gorgeous.
This would be one of those Sundays where I'm going to have to like focus on a couple of things because there's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
It would be too much to focus on all of it. But okay, good. So now we're going to the Gospel according to John, and chapter 2, verses 13 through 22. I guess I'll read it this time. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But Jesus was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. The word of the Lord. So, kind of an upsetting passage. You know, down in Delaware, and as here too in Nantucket, we've had to supplement what people donate, our members donate, which is generous in itself, with different fairs, like the Christmas market, here we have a summer fair, down in Delaware too. It seemed like we're always gearing up and getting volunteers and collecting things for something or another. The Christmas shop and things like that. And people would always remind me, people that were opposed to that would remind me of this passage. Jesus said not to turn on the marketplace. Look at all these tables sitting there, with stuff on them. But you can do what you got to do so we can support. You got to keep the heat on for Connie over here in the winter, so we can have this Bible study. Yeah, Connie's bundled up.
There is a fantastic comment on in good old Dummelo. He says, remember this is a British commentary. He mentions another scholar, Buchter, compares with this incident the state of the great Cathedral of London as painted in the literature of the time of Elizabeth and James I, when mules and horses laden with market produce were led through St. Paul's Cathedral as a matter of everyday occurrence, and bargains were struck there, and burglaries planned, and servants hired. So it's interesting. He compares this to something that happened in Elizabethan Jacobean times at St. Paul's in London. Interesting.
Well, the staff that the verger carries, which is like a shepherd's crook, was to get the sheep out of the church.
Yeah, that's right, the pigs. That's right. We have a verger too. Yeah, remember we had Ralph, our verger, down in Ralph. We had a nice older gentleman, Ralph, used to work for a florist, and we would dress. He was a verger. He had his stick, what they called, I think the verge. They call that stick. Curtis has one too. I offered him a different one. He said, "No, I need a nice long verge so that I can," because he has to poke the pigs out of the way as you march in, all the livestock and get those people out of the.
It was hilarious when I found that out.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I was at, again, I mentioned that church, Trinity Copley Square. Again, that church, the rector would climb up into the pulpit and dim the lights of the church, and then raise the light up. The spotlight would be on the pulpit, and you knew something important was going to be said in the meeting, any second. And but they had a fabulous verger he was a big guy. Maybe look like Twiggy, this great big guy. And Bob, and he was their, he was in charge of the sextons too. He had a nice desk at the front of their offices. But Bob would dress in his outfit, and he'd be in front of the rector as behind a big choir. They had like a 75-person choir. And Bob, we always thought Bob was like the bouncer. If anybody came forward for the rector, he was ready. But he was a big dude. I think he just had like his 85th birthday or something. He's still working there. So this is it shows the zeal that Jesus has. It quotes scripture. I'm not sure what passage that is. Let me see if I can find what's quoted here. And of course, all of our gospels, they refer so much to Hebrew scripture, to what we call the New Testament, and it gave authority to their witness, to their writings, that they could base it in scripture, and people, faithful people knew scripture, so they're quoting things that people could understand. And so, what is that one? Clemson's Temple, and of course, back in the day, it sounds so superstitious now, but the belief was that God demanded sacrifices. Mm-hmm. So that would be animal sacrifices. Again, even some horrible tradition about the firstborn, the firstborn male, be sacrificed. I'm the firstborn male in my family, so I'm sacrificed to the Episcopal Church. Someone's got to do it, and then I love. We talked about this last night in Prayers in the Attic. There's several psalms that says, God's saying, I don't need your sacrifices. I said last night, I don't need your stinking sacrifices. I don't need your incense. I don't need any of it. You're good. I'm good, but rather God wants us, right? That we would sacrifice, not physically even, but a sacrifice. That God wants all of us, not a little bit of sacrifice, That
also, there's this dramatic moment where he says, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And they're going, what? What are you talking about? Yeah. And traditional interpretation, of course, has been the resurrection. Yes. He's talking about the temple of his own body, but there's an interesting other interpretation given here. Many critics, however, think that our Lord's real meaning was, when this old dispensation of the ceremonial law is destroyed, I will quickly raise up in its place a new and spiritual religion.
Huh.
I've never thought of that.
I never heard that. Is that in Dumoulin also?
Yeah, it is.
Wow, I never heard that one.
That's an interesting, they could both be true.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just assume, because we've had a series now of predictions, what Jesus says. Remember, he said, get behind, after he said that he was going to be led away to die, but then be resurrected on the third day. Peter said, no way, and Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. I think that was just last week, right? Get behind me, Satan. I think there's a third resurrection prediction, and I think it was used, that's why the scholars probably chose this for Lent, because we're leading up to Good Friday. We don't want people to be despondent that Good Friday is the end of the story. And I probably told you that story when I was down in Delaware. When I arrived there, it's so hard to reach children and teenagers, but they had a teenager who grew up in the church, but I don't think. So she came. We had some confirmation classes. I think she was my only teenager that year. So her mother would come and we'd sit in the church and we'd talk to the girl, and she was in ninth grade, and so I said, well, we talked about what happened on Good Friday. We talked about Holy Week was coming up and so I said, well, we talked about what happened on Good Friday. I said, what happened after that? So nothing happened after that. He was dead. I said, well, what happened at Easter then? He said, well, at Easter, Jesus gave away money.
What?
And I said, is that why they're following him? He's like, yeah, he was giving away money. Wouldn't you follow him too? He's giving away money
Why did he say
on Easter. So So she thought Good Friday. So I said, "You think Good Friday's the end of the story, then? That he's just dead?" And again, I don't think they went to church very much, obviously, and she didn't retain it. But so I get a lot of preaching material out of that. Anyways, he gave away money. That's.
But where did she get that idea?
I don't know. I think maybe I've gone to people's homes at holidays, and they have chocolate coins on the table. I don't know what
But
tradition, what
the
culture that's from.
coins are from
I hope you straightened her
Christmas,
out.
and they're
Yeah, I did.
They're supposed to be like the coins that Saint Nick put through the.
That's right. It's Christmas. They have the coins on the table.
Yeah.
I don't know. She had it in her mind.
Yeah, that's why.
I think when we passed the plate, she thought people were taking money, not putting it in. A reverse collection, a disbursement is called. So, anyways, God doesn't want our stinking sacrifices, but wants us, all of me. Why not take all of me? We always say, I forget who it was some priest I heard speak. I'm sure just quoting someone. I think it was my rector as young adults. We belonged to Grace Church in Providence, big, beautiful sandstone church. It's the same architect as Richard Upjohn, same architect, Trinity Church, Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
And so the rector there mentioned something about that God's money in our pocket. Yeah, God's money in our pocket. And he said, we in the church talk about tithing, that we give 10% of our money back to God, 10%. And so 10% of the money in your pocket is God's money. He said, actually, all the money in your pocket is God's money. God's just asking for a little bit back to do God's work, All the money is God's money, And so that's kind of a cool thing, I think. Cool reminder. Mm-hmm. And I told you that there's a true story. I know I've repeated this probably at every stewardship campaign, where when I was in Arizona for my first job, someone called. What happened was we got a call that one of our volunteers' father had died. Actually, it was a staff member had died, and on Monday we received an envelope from him, and it was his check, and it said, "Here's my check to keep my pledge up to date." Pledge is the money we pledge we'll give to the church for the year. My pledge up to date. He said, "I don't want to die with any of God's money in my pocket."
Oh,
which is such a coincidence.
Yeah.
And so I always tell Ollie that you got to keep your pledge up to date. Don't want to die with God's money in our pocket, So, anyways, that's an interesting. It's a little bit again. Some people too would say this shows because Jesus is so angry. We believe that Jesus is both fully divine. God, the Son of God. God come down in human flesh, but also very completely human too. Very, both God and human, divine and human. And so this, I've heard people say too, preachers say, well, this shows his anger, his human side. He couldn't be pastoral in this situation. He had to turn things upside down. And also sometimes I feel, I know when I first went out to Arizona. Actually, I think it was when I went from Wickford, Rhode Island to Philadelphia to work for the bishop. My brother Matthew, who lives out here in Nantucket, wrote me a nice card, which I have in one of my Bibles or prayer books. It says, God is taking you out of your comfort zone. Like God is taking you out of your comfort zone to do this work in Philadelphia. And so sometimes that's what, God comes in and kind of turns things upside down, Jesus does, and sets us in a different path. And thank God that happens. Otherwise, it wouldn't be such an interesting life, I think, maybe.
Yeah, true.
So it's like St. Paul, where our church is named after St. Paul. He was knocked off his horse to change his ways. Talk about change, right? He went from killing Christians to inspiring Christians to this day. St. Paul. Yeah. So what else, kids?
Oh, I don't know. I have to leave.
Very good. I think it's time for us to leave as it is. I'm going to close with a prayer. Do you have meetings at 12:30, or just you stick to your strict luncheon schedule?
I have a meeting. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So let me see. Stick with tradition here, our traditional prayers. And the Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
With thy spirit.
Almighty God, who by our baptism into the death and resurrection of thy Son, Jesus Christ, dost turn us from the old life of sin, grant that we, being reborn into new life in him, may live in righteousness and holiness all our days. We pray this through the same thy Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Thanks, Loretta, for joining us on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, I loved hearing that your church bells were ringing.
I know, that's right, the church bell was ringing, and also, I don't know if you can hear the ferry that goes off at 12, too. I'll open the windows next week so you can hear all the sounds, yeah.
Okay.
The ferry horn goes off, and is that the one that's some old, it's an old horn from an old ferry, too.
It's from the Novska.
The Novska ferry.
Yeah.
An old ferry that was put in retirement. They kept the horn.
Yeah. Oh, the Novska was.
All right, bless everybody. See you tonight, Loretta.
Steve, take care.